Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name is Yogesh Chavda. I'm the lecturer at the University of South Carolina in marketing, and I'm also the founder of Y2S Consulting. And today, I am absolutely delighted to have Ilya from Fifth Row here with us. We're going to get into an amazing conversation around Fifth Row as a company and what they're doing. But before we get into that, Ilya, welcome to the show. Can you hear me?
I
Ilya,
can hear you, but you're breaking up just a little bit from that perspective. Let me see if it's on my end
okay.
or on yours. It is probably on my end. Okay, so let me fix that really
Okay,
quickly
I
here.
can hear you fine. So
Let me just fix that really quickly. Apologies for that.
no worries at all. So while we wait for Ilya to get his Wi-Fi reconnected, what I will say is
Okay,
that
perfect.
you're back. Okay, perfect. So Ilya, welcome to the
Apologies
show,
for
my
that.
friend.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, some technical issues right in the first minute of the live cast, even though we did a couple of minutes of a trial run before that, but it happens.
It
Is it all right
happens.
in terms of connection?
Yeah, it's perfect. I can hear you fine, and I can see you fine. So you're doing really well. So, Ilya, why don't we first start off by asking a simple question, which is tell us about who you are. Where do you live? What do you do? And what's your background?
Of course, of course. So my name is Ilya. I'm the head of growth at Fifth Row. I'm based over on the Czech Republic. Since I was probably about 12 years old, I've been basically traveling around the world due to my expat family. So I lived in the Netherlands, lived in Hong Kong and Switzerland, a little bit in Hungary, and then came to Prague, Czech Republic, and decided to stay around here. Essentially, I've been here for the past couple of years already,
Hmm.
and essentially uh, very much economics based background and a startup based background around
Hmm.
starting or trying to start two or three companies essentially at the beginning,
Hmm.
learning the hard way and going through those pieces of knowledge essentially with myself with practical knowledge, and then afterwards joining U Plus Digital Ventures, which is the parent company of Fifth Row.
Yeah.
That it all started with essentially. That was around 4 years ago. By now already a little bit longer than that even. I'm basically
Hmm.
starting by working directly with the CEO and a few partners at U Plus, which is basically a corporate venture builder, a consultancy. That is actually not active anymore, so I'm sure we'll talk more about that once we get to Fifth Row. And
Hmm.
then making my way through, starting on Fifth Row around 2 years ago once it launched, and basically now leading growth here and basically focusing on growth of the business, new clients onboarding, existing client relationships, and a few other things because of course it's a startup life, so
Yeah, of
you have
course.
to play a few different cards.
Absolutely, absolutely. That is always the case for any startup company at the end of the day, right? So why don't we get into it right away? So tell us about Fifth Row. What is Fifth Row? What do they do? And what's their value proposition?
Of course, let's talk about Fifth Row, and for that I think it's really important also to understand of where we came from in
Mhm.
terms of what we were doing before that and the
Yeah.
U Plus Digital Ventures background.
Mhm.
So what that was is basically a corporate venture builder. We worked with Fortune 1000s, Fortune 500s, focusing on just basically building new ventures for them and as well as other innovation consultancy work. Did that for about 13 years, expanded to the US market something like 5, 6 years ago, and we're about a 110 people company. But
Mhm.
then we realized that AI is going to replace a lot of what we do, right? There's actually a little bit more background even to that that I think is worth mentioning. Approximately around the time, maybe half a year before GPT became much more popular and a few other AI systems popped up, we were actually thinking about setting up a separate team in each of the verticals. So all of the different industries of
Mhm.
experts that would be constantly essentially doing research, constantly identifying white spaces, constantly identifying new ventures and bringing them to market, right? As a always on capability.
Mhm.
That would have to be, of course, a huge, capital intensive process, people intensive process as well. And then approximately 2 years ago, very much aligned with time of kind of transition of the company into that, or expected transition, we basically realized that, okay, some of the AI capabilities are already here. and we can do
Mhm.
this process much, much faster, right? Much, much more efficient, and also, of course, at a much lower cost. So we quickly put something together, and the initial goal was just to focus on the venture building piece, just to focus on our most common offering of about 5-6 months that started from market research to ideation to concept creation, and then testing and validation of some of these ventures on the market, some of these potential solutions. And the goal was very simple: be the quickest at identifying these potential ventures that can be launched, and be the best at basically matching them with the right people to bring them to market, right? Have an
Mhm.
engine for that that's very scalable, and that's very, very quick, and works also very well.
Mhm.
We did that. That was the very first use case, and that's essentially how we transitioned from Uplus to Fifth Row. At the beginning, it was a combination of both companies, but then around March last year, we realized that every single project is essentially around Fifth Row, and we much more prefer the platform approach of doing business versus just staying a consulting company. So we actually folded the consulting company into Fifth Row. We're not doing that anymore. We're not doing any venture building from that perspective, but are really
Mhm.
focusing on platform enablement of teams. And a very quick way to describe Fifth Row is basically, as a one sentence, right?
Mhm.
Autonomous workforce for strategy, research, and innovation. So what we focus on essentially is really allowing people at the core of it to focus on much more meaningful things and parts of their job by automating a lot of the mundane, manual parts of the job with autonomous agents, right?
Mhm.
Putting
Mhm.
research, analysis, consulting processes in autopilot, and allowing people to act on these traceable insights and then make the clear decisions. We essentially started with venture building. That was around 2 years ago. We then went into other knowledge work processes, other business
Mhm.
processes, other innovation, and other domain consulting offerings, and started automating these. Around 4 or 5 months ago, we launched an app store, which is basically a collection of 30 plus or so really complex knowledge work processes that are
Mhm.
repeatable and recurring, that
Mhm.
normally take 100 plus hours to execute on. And a lot of the times, people hire consultants for them.
Mhm.
And we believe that we can basically automate them from 80 to up to even sometimes 100%, and really allow to shift that all the time that's spent right now on the manual,
Mhm.
on the research, etc. work by the people that can be doing actually much more meaningful things to allow
Mhm.
them to focus on the strategic thinking, strategic part of their jobs.
You've said a lot there, so let's kind of unpack a few of the themes that you
Let-
brought up. So, some of the things that I picked up, as you were describing, Fifth Row, is that in a way you're disrupting consulting, right?
yeah,
So, talk about that first, and we'll get to the agentic part of it, second. But
yeah,
that's a really interesting um, angle that you guys have taken, which I honestly had not heard about until I heard you and I talked a few weeks ago
yeah.
for the first time, and you kind of like brought that to my attention. I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. So, tell us, how are you seeing the disruption of the consulting world first and foremost because of your company?
For sure, for sure. And I think that this angle also came from the fact that we didn't like being consultants ourselves. And we didn't want to continue doing the consulting part of the job that
Hmm.
much anymore, right? Always kind of project-based scopes, always focusing on some specific thing.
Hmm.
A lot of stakeholder management involved in that, et cetera, et cetera. But
Yeah.
essentially, the biggest part that we wanted to disrupt and that we are disrupting is when a company wants to launch a project, they want to find a new idea to disrupt the market, right? They want to do something.
Hmm.
They normally overpay consultants that actually do fairly straightforward work for
Yeah.
80-90% of the process, but
Yeah.
just charge insanely high prices for it, and then deliver essentially a deck of outputs that in many cases is not even actionable, right?
Yeah.
So in many times when it's around, I don't know, research, analysis, stakeholder interviews, right, then coming up with some competitive analysis, coming up with some personas, all of these are fairly straightforward processes that oftentimes cost anywhere from 150K upwards to $1 million, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And at the end of the day, we believed that if we can automate our own process of venture building from
Hmm.
about 6 months to about 4 weeks, then why can't we do the same for other consulting offerings? Why can't we do the
Hmm.
same for, you know, ecosystem mapping, trend analysis, identification of white spaces,
Hmm.
evaluation of ideas, coming up with new ideas that are relevant in the market that can help grow the company.
Hmm.
And we actually do believe that consultants are important and they bring a lot of value, but just not in the 100% of the process, right?
Right.
Um, we believe about 80% can definitely be automated because that's mainly the manual research related tasks, some analysis, some reasoning, of course, on top of it, some calculations, some forecasting. And then
Hmm.
20% is where the strategic works comes in. And yes, there are cases, of course, where within the company they're missing that expertise and consultants should be brought on board, right? So there's
Yeah.
definitely a place for that, but it's just
Hmm.
not in the whole 100% of the process as we believe.
So in that, what you're saying basically is that there are certain tasks that are there that you're describing as being automated, right? And one of them you're calling out very specifically in a way is market research, competitive analysis, other kinds of research that you may do.
Yeah.
You're saying you can actually automate that because it's pretty like repetitive kind of work at the end of the day. If I'm pretty certain that my friends and colleagues in the market research world would be like, no, that's not the case. Everything is customized. So I want you to kind of like give us an understanding of why do you believe it's repeatable and can be automated in the first place.
Yeah, of course, it depends on a per client or per company basis and per use case basis, right? But if we're
Sure.
talking about something like, let's say, startup scouting
Mhm.
overall,
Yeah.
right, it comes back to the same concept of basic analysis of lots of unstructured data and drawing useful conclusions from that, and being
Yeah.
able to act first on that. That really brings you the competitive advantage and allows you to gain market share in the market at the end of the day, right?
Mhm.
That's where AI is really powerful at, and that's where LLMs are really powerful at because
Mhm.
they can ingest hundreds of sources. They can search for these sources day and night while you sleep, while you have your lunch, and you can very much predefine kind of the tasks that they have to complete,
Mhm.
which they will do, right?
Yeah.
Identify new PR releases of funding, let's say,
Mhm.
on a daily basis. Identify new Crunchbase entries of startups that appear on a daily basis using their API, right?
Yeah.
Identify new um, patents being filed, let's say, by new companies that weren't registered
Mhm.
before. All of this,
Mhm.
of course, can be done manually as well, but would require a lot of analysts, a lot of manual time.
Yep.
Now you can basically set up an army, as I like to sometimes call it, of agents, of autonomous agents. Think about these like a digital extension of your team,
Yeah.
predefine the high level tasks that they have to complete, and they'll be able to basically go and complete that task with access to the internet, with access to the needed databases, and then draw a useful conclusion for you, right?
Yeah.
Of course, it depends on a per company or per use case basis in terms of what the specific output format is, what the specific insights you're most interested in.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, if I'm, for example, working with, like right now, for example, we're working with a consulting company that does a
Mhm.
lot of opportunity space deep dives, right?
Mhm.
Whenever
Mhm.
they work with a company, that's a common project that they're offering. Of course, the industry is different. Of course, the type of customers is different. Of course, the context is different. But at the same time, at the end of the day, it's identification of key players, ecosystem mapping, who are the competitors, who are the main partners, who are the suppliers, what does the supply chain look like, right? At the end of the day, when you look at trends, is the same types of trends. What are the technological trends, consumer need trends?
Mhm.
If we look at competitor activity, are there any new product launches that you should be aware of? Are there new patents that are being filed? So the high level topics are the same, but of course the details can be very much customized, and that comes by very, very often. So it's important to be able to, from our side, offer a number of ready to use solutions, but
Mhm.
then also we do offer the ability to customize a lot of these points. And whenever you want a visualized mind map, let's say, of the trends, that can be easily inserted, or whenever you want a specific table output with 7 columns and 5 rows, that
Mhm.
also can be predefined, of course, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. So, in this context that you're describing it, right? So, you talked about agentic models. So, I think you and I have now become so like familiar with this, but for the purpose of the audience, um,
Yeah.
why don't you first start by describing what is actually an agentic model, and then how are you actually using that in the context of what you just described?
Of course, of course. So what I would define overall autonomous agents as is, as I mentioned, the easiest way to think about them is like an autonomous digital extension of your team that lives somewhere in the cloud, but you can basically predefine the tasks that you want them to be executing high level, pick what kind of tools they have access to, whether it's public research, so access to the open internet, whether it's some private database, whether it's some files that you upload on a case-by-case basis, whether
Mhm.
it's a paid database that you have access to, whether it's a specific patent database that you specify, and
Mhm.
then map out a process in a series of steps, like you would map it out when giving it to a team of analysts that you have working for you, right? Or that you're
Yeah.
working with,
Yeah.
essentially, whenever you're creating a brief. And then let it run on autopilot whenever you need to, right? If you define an agentic model, I think a good way to talk about it is basically a system that can autonomously execute a multi-step process toward a defined goal at the end of the day,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
difference between an agentic or an autonomously agentic system versus just automation, right? That like something like process automation
Mhm.
or anything else, is that it can actually be executed autonomously. It doesn't need to be micromanaged, and you don't need to care that much about these triggers or specific kind of signals that
Mhm.
you would normally do or put together in a
Mhm.
process automation kind of system, right? So if you
Yeah.
I don't know, have worked before with Zapier, or if you've created workflows in HubSpot, Salesforce, or anything like that before, you need to be very specific, right? This kind of email comes in. If it has exactly that tag, then do this or do that. With autonomous agents, you can be much more kind of open-ended in terms of your tasks. Identify the trends based on what you've identified. Do the following research. If there are ambiguities, handle the ambiguities in the following way, high level. And because they're
Mhm.
autonomous, and that's the power of the agents, essentially of AI agents, they will figure out a solution to that. But also there are a few things that we can talk about that we should keep in mind when working with the autonomous agentic systems overall, because they're also not, of course, the smartest kind of experts or the smartest consultants out there. So they do need
Mhm.
to be uh, structured well and constructed well overall.
Sure. So, there's so many questions I've got, but I want to stay focused here. So, when you have these kinds of models, right? The way you
Yeah,
described, like, they can handle, um, a lot of variability. It can, you've defined a process within each agent and then across agents, and they're all connected, so that your input may be coming in from the outside world, but then there's the process that you've defined that gives you a very structured output in a way, right?
yeah.
So, typically when you are working with clients with these kinds of models, are they asking you to use just the general large language models, or are they asking you to use predetermined proprietary data that they may have, and they want you to use your system with their data? What is the scenarios that you typically face?
Great question. And I think it's a step-by-step process, mostly with our clients, where we
Mhm.
first start with basically just publicly available data and more so standard use cases. But then as we start working together with them, all of the
Mhm.
times we start leveraging their proprietary data, their
Mhm.
internal data, we can connect to any existing internal systems. Like, for example, for a client of ours that's an insurance company, we've even connected to the 35,000 page internal SharePoint knowledge center and
Wow.
built a custom interface for them that lives somewhere else that their customer facing agents can utilize for any customer queries. And because they've tested Filter against a few other tools, and we've performed best in terms of private data extraction.
Mhm.
But I think what's also really important to keep in mind is that whenever you're working with autonomous agents, the model by itself is not the thing that matters the most or is the only factor of success here. Of course, as models get smarter, the outputs get better as well.
Yeah.
And that's why we also multimodal from that perspective. So if there is any request from a client perspective, which has actually not come by yet, to integrate other models or some specific models that are vertical specific, we can very easily do it. Right now, transparently, also we use OpenAI's models on the backend, but also we use them using the enterprise model API, which prohibits them from training on the data. So that's
Mhm.
why we can also be SOC 2 GDPR compliant. And that's why also we work with enterprises and Fortune 500s, and they
Mhm.
trust that nothing is training on their data and that it's safe and proprietary.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the model is only a part of the quality of the outputs. With the agents by itself, it's two other very important factors that matter
Yeah.
and that are very, very important when setting them up. Number one is access to the right data. So,
Mhm.
of course, the more data you have to run analysis on, or the more quality data, the more quality will be the outputs. And here, there are also two ways to think about it. Number one is, can you build a data infrastructure that takes into account tens and tens or hundreds of sources whenever running a query,
Hmm.
picks the right ones and gives you the needed information? Or are you limited to, let's say, like um, ChatGPT's existing knowledge base that has been pre-trained on? That's
Yeah.
number one. And then, of course, private data comes in there as well into play. And then number two
Hmm.
is the instructions of the agents. So autonomous agents can run with instructions as simple as identify the latest news of of a specific company, right? Or identify the trends in a market. But then they are much less managed in terms of the specific output quality or like comprehensiveness of the output. And even if you compare that to, like, let's say we take identify the latest trends in a specific sector as one instruction of an agent, and then the other one has identify the key trends in a specific sector, make sure to include technological trends, consumer needs, latest competitor PR releases, or whatever else that makes a difference when looking at trends or running a trend radar or trend analysis. The second
Yeah.
agent will be much more comprehensive in terms of the outputs and will be much more detailed and much more useful. So the instructions of the agents matter a lot, and that's why
Hmm.
we've also we're not leveraging the people's time and the people's prompt engineering skills to do that, because that's also one of the biggest bottlenecks we've seen in the past with operating AI tools. We've basically built a no-code tool that allows them to just describe what they want to automate, and will automatically create the needed agents for it, unless we have it already pre-existing, right? So we
Hmm.
have a
Hmm.
number of tools that are already ready to use, and that
Right.
helps a lot.
So, are these models that you're describing, are they accessible by the client, or is it something? Is it, or do you have like a customer service team internally at Fifth Row that does all this stuff and then gives the output to the client? How does that interaction work? I was not clear about that.
Of course, it's fully SaaS from that perspective. We do also have a supports team because we
Mhm.
believe also in terms of AI adoption in companies. What we see
Mhm.
as a big bottleneck is just overall education and even just setting the time needed to get through the learning curve of the AI platform itself to get to really, really valuable outputs, right?
Yeah.
So we do have a support team from that perspective, and we don't actually do almost any consulting. We mostly focus on just helping teams get to value much faster, especially during the setup, during the initial month, where we can take a couple of their use cases and basically just set up the needed agents using exactly the same tools they could be using on the platform, but
Hmm.
just much faster without them having to spend the time to get onboarded. And then,
Yeah.
of course, also train them and make sure that they know how to operate the platform. But except for that, the users have full flexibility in terms of either using any of the existing platform tools
Hmm.
or going in and just basically, literally, the process is as simple as clicking on a button. Then the first question you will see there is, what is your high level goal of the process? You would like to right now automate, or of the project you would
Hmm.
like to conduct. Uh, in natural language describing, I want to conduct a competitive analysis and have that run every single week. It will then ask you follow-up questions if it needs to know any follow-up details to make sure that the output is as good as possible, or just pre-create the agents right away. And then you can go also manually do that too. So you can, on a per agent level, pick what LLM they're using, what kind of tools they have access to. What we
Hmm.
call tools are basically access to the internet, private data sets, private data paid databases that we have access to, like Crunchbase, or any other
Hmm.
tools. Like recently, for example, we've introduced patent search. So there's a specific tool that allows you to search for patents and just provides a more comprehensive output when you just have that one use case. So they
Right.
can be defined on a per agent basis, and users have full flexibility in terms of customization or creating things from scratch.
So, this clearly requires a new set of skill sets, I would imagine, for the user, right? So,
Yeah.
what have you seen so far in terms of the the quote unquote upskilling that your clients have had to do to be able to use your tools?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a very interesting point overall right now as we get into this kind of world of AI enablement across different domains, right? And
Yeah.
I think I've read multiple tens probably of interesting kind of bites of information, but to call out two, I think the first one was kind of when hiring. It was some podcast that I was listening to, and there was a story about a hiring process of a new
Mhm.
developer. Right, and I'm sure you've heard of Cursor as well, one of the fastest growing startups that basically automates some part of the coding process for
Yeah.
developers. And literally, one of the requirements there, as part of the job description, was being able to operate the needed AI tools, because
Yeah.
everyone knows that basically, if you do not know how to operate them, you're not going to be performing as efficiently as people that do know how to operate them. Because it's not like they're replacing the job of a person; it's like they're making the person be able to act as four FTs, right?
Yeah.
So they're making people much more efficient. Same was around a company-wide letter that the Shopify CEO, I think, sent out a
Mhm.
couple of weeks ago, where he basically just said, unless you can prove to me that a specific task cannot be executed by an AI agent, I'm not going to be hiring for that role, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think, of course, that's a very. I just took one, piece of information from there. Of course, there was a lot about how everyone needs to be educated about this and how they're going to be offering resources for it and assistance, etc. But
Yeah.
just that kind of very clear and very, I think, significant move from the perspective of, okay, do we just go and hire people? Do we just go and hire consultants, from outside the company? Versus,
Yeah.
okay, can we actually upskill ourselves internally, get, a few software platforms that can supercharge our existing teams, and then just become much more efficient internally, right? I think
Yeah.
that's a question now that more and more companies overall have. And definitely the upskilling, the educational part is a big part of it. We've heard multiple times throughout our trials that what has also set us apart from other tools and platforms out there is not per se pointing out at like the quality of the output or anything like that, but it's on the customer service that we provide and customer support, and just really the tailored approach to
Mhm.
this team has that use case. Let's focus on executing on that in the next week or two.
Mhm.
Bring them value right away. Show them how to operate the platform versus just leaving it be, and
Yeah.
giving that fully kind of SaaS, or going down the fully SaaS approach for all of the use cases that we deal with. That
Mhm.
has really set us apart and has been very helpful in terms of getting companies onboarded. Another
S-
example is literally like
Yeah.
an energy company that I had 4 days ago, I think, connect with, and they also mentioned again education, and being able to spend the time on the platform to understand how it can be leveraged for
Mhm.
their day-to-day jobs, essentially, right?
So yeah, but I get that, and I think what I was I'm trying to kind of like get to is that,
Yeah,
for people who, let's say for example, I'll pick a random company just to make the point, Procter and Gamble, right? I worked there
yeah,
for many years. It's been a while since I worked there, but by and large, they have a process of how they want to work with things, right? So let's say if you were to get them as an account, and you have to work through, there's the onboarding part. We all get that, you have to learn how to use the tool itself, right? But
yeah,
when you start actually operationalizing all this, these models, I'm guessing that there is also another part, around, okay, I'm putting these kinds of inputs in, the model is doing its thing, right? It's giving me some outputs. I have to evaluate the outputs and decide, is this what I was looking for? Is this what I needed? Is this good enough? Are there any gaps? um, or is it completely off base and I have to restart the
yeah.
whole process again, right? So um, can you talk a little bit about that part of what kind of skill sets you think people should be thinking about or planning around?
If I understand your question correctly, I think that it's that understanding of what a great output looks like and what the process is
Yeah.
like from a strategic point of view that are
Right.
really needed, right? Because especially also when defining the agents by itself,
Hmm.
as I mentioned, what's really important is the instructions. For instructions to be even like pre-created automatically really well, you need to describe the process well, any details within the process,
Hmm.
um, any kind of steps that have to be taken, and also, of course, the output that's desired at the end of the day, and having
Yeah.
a good understanding of what the process is like, because you've had 10 years of experience behind your back, and you know that when you conduct
Hmm.
a trend radar, you need to know about these insights and then make a connection to the company's existing strategy and see how that might affect it.
Yeah.
Is what's going to also make a huge difference in terms of somebody like an intern setting up a trend analysis versus somebody with much more senior expertise, right? And
Yeah,
that's why
exactly.
also these
Yeah.
experts we believe are needed when doing the setup.
So, are you seeing that, with your clients right now, that you're having more people with seniority who are the ones who are interacting with you, or are you also seeing, people who are more junior in their careers who don't have all that background and experience just yet? They're also engaging with you guys and they're figuring out how to use these kinds of tools.
It's a combination of both, to be honest. And I think that the situation is on a per company basis. A lot of the
Mm.
times the initiative comes from, or most of the times, initiative comes from the more senior people in the organization. But then the
Yeah.
actual operators on a day-to-day basis are managers, junior managers, senior managers,
Hmm.
right,
Hmm.
that are not C-level executives, but
Yeah.
still that are, I would say, very senior within the organization, hold a very important position, right?
Yeah.
I think another part that's important to mention here is what we found out that we are really focusing on since lately, since a couple of months ago, is understanding what are these complex knowledge work related use cases that happen a lot in most of the companies, right, across each of the domains: innovation,
Mm.
strategy, research, investment, M&A, etc. And building them out based on our expertise of doing this as a consulting business for 10 plus years, as well as also, of course, best practices across different industries, and offering those as ready to use solutions. Because by doing that, also even an analyst that might get access to it and that maybe doesn't know all of the intricacies will still be able to get a very high quality output without having to do anything essentially.
Right. Right. No, that makes sense. And I think what I'm kind of like feeling a little bit reassured about, and for what it's worth, is that there's too much noise in the system right now. Oh, that entry level jobs will disappear because of agentic models, or how do you train people who are early in their career and who don't have the experience? How will they get the experience if these models are doing all the work for you? What I'm hearing you say is no, actually, you still will get the experience. You're just going to get the experience from a different way,
Yeah,
right? And instead of it being you as an individual contributor, it's you as an individual contributor with your teammate, which is your agentic model or your suite of agentic models that you're using to help you get your job done, basically.
exactly. And I never really got this point of like I'm not going to learn by doing it in the new way, right? Because I think this point is very similar to like even if you take the simplest example, industrial revolution overall,
Yeah.
right? Like, okay, so we were doing things one way, then we
Yeah.
started doing things another way. Of
Yeah.
course, a different way of doing things, and you don't learn how to do it by hands, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to do anything, right? You're just going to be
Exactly.
operating, or you're going to be focusing on other parts of the process because now you create efficiency, right?
Yeah.
And now you can do more. You can, new areas of opportunities open up essentially, right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
100% agree with you.
Absolutely. So tell me, from a human oversight perspective, what would be some of the best practices that you would suggest when you're using agentic models like like yours, for example?
Yeah, yeah. So overall, in terms of human oversight, I think it depends on the platform that you're using and the tools, because one big thing that causes, of course, a lot of kind of question marks around AI usage is hallucinations, right? Whenever
Yeah.
people have used ChatGPT and they see, okay, this link doesn't work, it's non-existent, or this fact doesn't make sense. And I'm
Mhm.
sure you run into this where you even sometimes say it, no, actually, this, I don't know, wasn't mentioned. And then it says, yeah, actually, you're right? It wasn't mentioned.
Yeah.
So I think this is a big part in terms of the human oversight there. Um, and like this is one part in terms of the more kind of hallucination: is this actually correct, is this not? And then the other part is the relevance of the outputs and how do you get to more relevant or more desired outputs, right?
Mm.
What the first part we definitely believe can be automated, and that's what we've done as well. So we have essentially a verification layer sitting on
Mhm.
top of every single execution of an agent that checks for three main things. The first one is, has the information that is now presented been taken from the initial source? Is it present there or not? So if
Mhm.
it's not, then it can't present the information. And then
Mhm.
it's answering the initial task at hand with this information that's been now provided. The insights have actually answered the initial task. yes or no. If no, I need to go look for more sources, more information online
Yeah.
or anywhere else. And then just follow-up questions and comprehensiveness of the output, essentially. So that's
Right.
how we automate that part,
Hmm.
which basically allows our users to keep calm and always have inline citations and not have to spend the time on checking every single source against the
Hmm. Hmm.
initial every single insight against the initial source. Of course, I'll tell you transparently, everyone still does it like the first couple of weeks, right? Depending on how quickly they get used to it or they're comfortable with it. Of course,
Yeah.
first you want to check and see if it's there or not. But then after some
Hmm.
time, you got trust in the tech, and then you focus on other things. And the other part of the oversight is the most important, right? It's basically, especially with recurring appeal processes, if you want to get to a great templated workflow, it's about really thinking, okay, what is missing from this output, and running a couple of iterations, one or two, until when you can actually save it as a template and then run it every single day, run it across different departments, and be very comfortable with just inputting a few customization criteria and running the whole step-by-step process again.
Mm. Yeah, it makes sense. So, and I love the fact that you're talking about this verification system that's been overlaid on top, right? I've actually not heard that from a lot of people, so that's really cool to hear that. So, when these models are designed, are they kind of like designed so that they are working within a functional space? The workflows. So, is it going deep down, or is it going across, or both? I'm guessing it's both, right?
It can be both, yeah, exactly. So, for example, we have an app. So we have a solution essentially that combines something like 8 to 10 agents that conduct strategic foresight. Where
Mhm.
first it does a social or social, economic, political, etc.
Mhm.
analysis of the space,
Mhm.
right, with all of the signals, all of the new happenings, and then from there it then generates a number of scenarios, does some forecasting from there.
Mhm.
But we also have a simple workflow with 2 3 agents that first does trend analysis and then does trend forecasting, and then based on each of the trends, provides some strategic recommendations for a company. So it
Mhm.
can it can be both really. You can have a system, right, or a workflow, a set of agents that first conduct market research, then based on the market research, run analysis on top of that, and then come up with viable solutions for you. That goes from market research to then ideation and more so the venture building part of the process, right? So there is a lot of flexibility here, and that's also why we have, like, sometimes I mention so many different use cases for different domains, because this is literally how our journey within the company works. Like, for example, we started working with a media company in Germany.
Yeah.
We started working with their innovation team, and after the initial pilot, I've had conversations with probably around 10 11 teams across the enterprise,
Yeah.
from data analytics to marketing to events management to audit, regulatory affairs, etc. And we've picked basically something like 5 teams that are going to join the next part of the engagement with them,
Mhm.
right? Essentially, really expanding from just one team to
Yeah.
many, many other use cases.
I love that, and I think the thing that I'm kind of like really curious about in what you just said right now is that you're getting all these use cases. You're doing the like you said, like the research aspect, then the trend analysis, and then the ideation part, right? Um, how do you account for the quality of the ideation? Because I've heard and I've actually experienced this myself as well. Some of the
Yeah.
work I do, where the quality of the ideation coming out of these large language models are pretty much like regurgitating what's already out there, as opposed to really coming up with truly innovative things that have not existed as of now. Do y'all build that into your system, or is it accounted for? What do y'all do?
Hmm. That's a great question, I think. And we've basically, within our venture building app, the initial use case, that's mainly what we use for ideation use cases or use cases
Yeah.
around that. And what
Yeah.
happens there is basically we've done multiple things. The first one is that we basically, in terms of the actual prompt and the background, the system prompt, as some might call it, when running
Yeah.
the ideation, it has the background of around 13 ideation methods that are actually used by people all over the world, right? So you have jobs to be done,
Mm.
you have
Mm.
Google Venture Sprint, you have McKinsey 7S, etc., etc.
Mm.
Um, that are actually then utilized to create these ideas, right? So these are the methodologies that are used by people to actually come up with
Yeah.
ideas. And whenever
Yeah.
you put that framework there, not just leave it to the LLM itself to, okay, just give me some ideas, you're getting to, of course, much higher quality outputs. The other piece is that, of course, you can predefine it further. You can say, if such an idea is already existent on the market, which means you can match it with an existing product offering of the competitors. I'm not
Hmm.
actually interested in it. I'm interested in things that, or if it's present in more than 3 competitors, I'm not interested in it at all. I'm only interested in, very radically new ideas or kind of radically innovative ideas. So of course you can also customize and predefine it that way. But if somebody from our potential clients would ask me about the quality of the ideas, I would
Hmm.
always just point them to our success rates of being able to validate some of these ideas within last year. Because what we saw was a huge uptick in the success rate of getting to validate concepts from about
Hmm.
30% with manual consulting. So about 3 out of 10 ideas when we were doing it manually were
Hmm.
successfully validated.
Hmm.
And based on our 2024 data, about 9 out of 10 ideas that came out of the platform and went to validation were successfully validated by real end consumers. And this holds
Wow.
for any end consumer ideas. So B2C or B2B2C.
Mm.
Um, and the way we do that is we compare it to industry benchmarks, our results of basically landing page tests. They are also smoke tests or microsite tests. It's all the same thing, where you
Yeah.
would basically put a concept up, drive traffic to it using ads from the real potential audience, and see if people want to sign up for the idea.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
So we had about an 87% success rate of doing that in 2024 across something like 30 plus, 40 plus tests. And that is, I think, the best proof in terms of, okay, this actually works, right? This process
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
There can be a lot of subjective opinions about whether an idea is great or not. But at the end of the day, if you can show data, it always helps.
Of course, of course. No, that's really helpful, because you've actually hit a couple of things that I was, curious about. One is that the idea quality is you've got a framework for how do you actually get high quality ideas, right?
Yep,
Like the example of McKinsey or Google or jobs to be done.
yep, yep,
Those
yep.
are methodologies for you to get to high quality ideas at the end of the day. So you've got
Exactly.
that pre-built into your agentic models as well. And then the second part is what you're saying is that, okay, even now that I got an idea, how good is the idea really, really? You're actually doing a validation process as well with your customers or consumers or end users, and you're
Yep,
getting feedback on that. That gives you that kind of like that benchmark to say, okay, I've got that, and that's actually pretty brilliant actually, because oftentimes what I find is that and I've being on the client side, I can't tell you how many ideation sessions I've sat through or led myself. And one of the things that completely irks me even today is when somebody would say in the room that you may have like 4 or 5 different teams working on ideation, same product, right?
yep,
And then and everybody has similar ideas, and people say, oh, if we all have similar ideas, that's a good thing because that tells us that we're on the right track. And I'm sitting there saying, no, we're not. That means we have really failed because we've not really thought outside the box. Everyone's thinking
yep,
groupthink, basically. So
yep,
that's
yep,
why
100%.
I'm kind of like curious, just and I'm hopeful that with a model like what you're describing, you're actually able to create that diversity of ideas
Yep.
that people would have not necessarily gotten to themselves, basically.
And the thing is that also, with a lot of AI tools, it's basically like, or at least the way I see it, and also in this use case, it's really
Yeah.
kind of supercharging, accelerating that 0 to 1.
Yeah.
I don't think like whenever your expectation of AI tools is like a black box that can answer any
Mm.
questions and do your whole job for you, they're just
Yeah.
unrealistic because it's also not there yet, right? It's not a self kind of standing intelligent computer that can solve every single problem that you give it, right? But
Exactly.
it's a very, very fast horse, right? From that perspective,
Hmm.
probably the fastest horse out there right now.
Yeah.
And for example, for even ideation sessions, right? There are multiple approaches. If you do it manually, maybe you can send, a pre-read to people, ask them to ideate in advance. Then let's do a
Hmm.
workshop, collect ideas for 4 hours. Then let's do
Yeah.
that as a 3 day sprint or something like that, and then come out at the end of the day with some concept we really like. Or
Yeah.
you can run something that's AI powered, like for example, the Fifth Row venture building app, and get 20 ideas within 45 minutes, right, or 30 minutes.
Mhm. Hmm.
that already gives you a much better foundation as well, so that you don't like you can right away understand, okay, these ideas I like more, these ideas I like less. I actually want more ideas in this direction, so can you
Yeah.
give me five more there, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
okay, actually I want totally different ideas. I don't want, any of
Hmm.
these. I want to go super moonshot and get inspired, right? Maybe some of
Yeah.
them will not be feasible, maybe
Yeah.
they'll not be the right fit for our company, but I want to get inspired. And all of this can now happen within literally a matter of minutes versus days and weeks of work. And
Yeah.
of course, it's still very important to align internally and using the expertise that you have based on what you know about your customers, what
Hmm.
you know about the industry, right? Be
Yeah.
able to make the right call in terms of, okay, this idea probably has more potential, but you'll
Yeah.
have much more data and you'll be able to come to that conclusion much quicker than if you were doing it fully manually.
Absolutely. And again, this is such a fantastic use case, and it's one that's near and dear to my heart because, like I said, I've done this so many times in my career, and I think about the pain points that we used to face, right? One was, what information do we even have to help educate all the people who are participating in the ideation workshop, so we can level set everybody on the knowledge. That was always like one big ask that
Yeah,
was there. Second is, what is the methodology to help everybody ideate? And then the third step was, okay, now that I've got a whole bunch of ideas, are they descriptive enough for me to know what to do with the idea? Because oftentimes, people using post-it notes, and they'll say, in the case of body washes, and I still remember this one. Somebody would say fresh, fresh feeling body wash. But what the hell does that mean? Like, be
yeah,
more
yeah, yeah.
descriptive than that. So so you discard like 30% of those post-it notes because they're like one word or two word
Yeah.
post-its basically. So that's gone. In other words, we've lost precious time in quote unquote ideating, and then screen down to something that's manageable, and then you have to go through the testing process, right? And especially if you're working on a global brand, you want ideas to come from the market. So if every market's doing this, if everyone's involved, R&D, marketing,
Yeah.
insights, sales, whatever, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people that have to be all bought in to do that process basically, right? So I remember um, one of my friends, she was who led this for the beauty care business at P&G, and it took her a while. It took her a long time to get adoption of that manual
Yeah.
process back then.
Yeah.
So what excites me about what you're describing is that you can actually automate the whole process and you can run, kind of thing.
100%. And I think there is that part of the process, but then there is even the next step where it's one of our partners who mentioned this, that
Mm.
he was also working in many corporate environments and also in many venture studios. So for him, it was also fascinating how you can go from problem space and identifying like a customer
Mhm.
challenge to
Yeah,
an idea to a
yeah,
concept with a business model canvas with an understanding of features, with some headlines on how you can present this, and then
yeah.
from that even to a landing page within an hour or two, right? Because
Amazing.
what he mentioned is, imagine if you had this when you were trying to get buy-in for your ideas from your stakeholders, and you didn't have to spend 4 weeks on doing research around an idea.
Yeah.
You didn't have to see when your teammates or your colleagues or your team is overall available to help form this business case
Mhm.
for the stakeholder that actually needs to buy into this. But imagine this was a 60-minute process right now, right? How
Yeah.
many more ideas that are actually quality that right now probably got left somewhere, right,
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
backlog that never saw the light of the day, uh, would you have been able to execute on, right? So I
Mhm.
think that's
Mhm.
another big point there overall, because in a lot of the cases, it's not necessarily the um, like the problem not being of not knowing what to do, right? Or not knowing what you need to do, what needs to be
Mhm.
done. It's a
Yeah.
problem of just lack of time, resources, people, etc.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
100% agree with you.
I understand that. I totally get that. So when as you've been doing, you said you've been doing this for a couple of years, and obviously, the last 12 months, you've, definitely accelerated, your business as well. What would you say is like the number one issue in terms of adoption?
Within large companies, I assume, right?
Yeah, let's start with large companies. Yeah.
I think in terms of adoption within large companies, um, it's going to sound funny, but I think it's the procurement and internal AI governance processes that are probably
Yeah.
the largest bottleneck right now, right?
Yeah.
Because what we see a lot of the times is that, especially right now, a lot of companies setting up their AI related governance systems, AI, you know, strategy internally,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
they're just defining how they're working with these kinds of tools, how they're working with these kinds of platforms. We
Hmm.
see many, many times when we have great use cases from a business leader, and we have great interest from a specific domain or a team within the company, but then we are just stuck in a 3, 4, 5 month process of going through the needed checks,
Hmm.
doing the security assessments, which are of course also always overloaded in terms of work, those teams, and that
Hmm.
just slows the process down by 4, 6 months.
Oh wow. Yeah. No, I can
I
believe that.
think that no,
Yeah.
that's incredible, and it happens more often. I think that you would have imagined, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There is, for example, a company that we agreed to start working with, and they confirmed it in October last year, and we
Hmm.
still haven't kicked it off. So it's been like 8 months right now, something like 7, 8 months.
Oh wow.
But
Yeah.
we are right now in the final stages of the process, so I'm still hopeful.
Yeah. Knock on wood. Knock on wood, my friend. It'll come
Exactly,
through.
no, exactly.
I
So I
totally
think
understand.
that's the main thing
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
and I think afterward is uh, basically just finding those, I think, repeatable and recurring use cases, right, that really bring the value. That's what we also
Yeah.
focus on within the initial weeks or months of the engagement, is really just understanding, okay, so you have right now this one project, but it's going to end in a month, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
what is something that you do often that takes up a lot of your day, that's very manual, right, that can be
Yeah.
broken down into a series of steps. Let's see
Yeah.
if we can automate it. And just having those conversations and the needed discussions. If those are not identified, that's a big barrier to adoption, because then it's still being viewed as, I
Mhm.
think, a replacement to like a consulting engagement that's one off. So, okay, we now got a much cheaper consulting kind of a replacement, right? Essentially, we
Yeah.
got all of
Yeah.
insights, it's great, but the project is finished now. I need to get back to my job. So, if we are not successful in terms of identifying those recurring, repeatable things, I think that's the number two bottleneck.
Got it. Got it. So looking at some of the emerging technologies that are coming out, and this week has been a pretty crazy week with so many announcements from so
It's
many of
crazy.
these
Yeah.
organizations. Right, it's hard to keep up with everything that's going on, of course. And one thing I don't do is try to capture the news of the day, because there are much better people who can do that kind of stuff than I can, right? And personally, I also don't have the time to do that. But as you're looking at what's on the horizon, are there anything is there anything that's exciting you that could be built into your current, agentic models or things of that nature?
To be honest, nothing off the top of mind that would really like make or break it, right, from that perspective,
Yeah,
because even like, for example, we take the deep research models by ChatGPT, right, that are
yeah,
fairly widely used right now from that perspective.
yeah,
We utilize their non-deep research models, actually. So we utilize their 4.1 right now as an example,
yeah,
transparently, and not the O3 that they released recently, because
mm,
we basically, well, the whole deep research logic is something that we actually came up with in February last year, which was called Tree of Thought back then by us. So there's, right,
mhm,
a series of steps that are then automatically created from a specific task, that are then followed to provide a certain answer, right? That's what
right,
deep research is essentially at the bottom of it, right? You say, I
yeah,
want to do trend analysis. Okay, so what do I need to do? What kind of trends are interesting, etc. So we automated that process with a number of tools within our platform right now that just provides much more traceability and transparency, and also
mhm,
customization possibilities for the user,
yeah,
where they can set this process up however they would like, and essentially each agent is then powered by deep research.
mhm,
So from that perspective, like any breakthroughs or no breakthroughs come really to mind. Of course, we're always excited for smarter, cheaper, faster models, because
Yeah.
that at the end of the day brings a better experience to our clients, right? Um, and that's probably it from that perspective, right? There might be some more kind of technical pieces.
Mhm.
I know we're always in the outlook of in terms of how can we make it faster, more
Yeah.
efficient, but
Yeah.
nothing really like, for example, from the announcements this week that would really kind of spark my eyes. I'm just more
Mhm.
excited about the development of the overall space, I would say. But
Yeah.
what about from your side? Like, did anything kind of um, get your attention?
Yeah, there were a couple of things that caught my attention that I certainly want to spend some time, playing around with. I think it was Google that talked about multimodal technologies
Yeah,
in a much bigger way. I'm actually excited about that because I believe that is the next, like the next level for how we can leverage AI. So between
yeah,
video, audio, image and text, if we can, integrate all those things together so that you can move seamlessly back and forth, I think is really cool. And I think their text to video or image to video generator can now
yeah.
also include sound, I think, right? So I haven't tried it yet, but I'm curious to see how good that is. So that was one thing that certainly caught my attention. And the second thing that caught my attention, um, from a university perspective, and from a student perspective, Google also announced or said that for the next 12 months, students with a university ID can get access to Google Gemini for free, right?
Ah, that's amazing. I missed
Right.
that. Wow, that's super exciting. Yeah,
Right. So for any students who are listening, you go on to Google Gemini with your university ID and get it for 12 months for free, right? So I would highly recommend that. But the bigger point in that, which I think gets missed by people, is that they're playing in the education space, and that is a
yeah.
huge disruptor for all the academics that are out there, who are still trying to hold students back from saying things like you cannot use AI in your research or in your essay writing or whatever. These guys are providing it for free. Students are going to use it, so we have to kind
Of
of like
course, yeah,
you know so who's going to win that battle? Not the academics. I'm sorry. You can
100%.
threaten this, you can threaten the students as much as you want to, but at the end of the day, it's a free resource that's available. People are going to
Yeah,
use it, so we have to rethink how we do our education model as a consequence of that. you know so I don't think people are necessarily wrapping their heads around this in a big way, but I'm certainly thinking about it, and I'm I'm excited by it more than anything for the students, to be honest with you. You know,
yeah.
because if they're jumping on board, they're going to be in a much better place as a consequence. But that's just me. So
No, I'm actually really curious about how the educational system overall is going to develop now with all of the AI applications, right? And
yeah,
of course, a lot of the students are using AI to write papers, right? Find
hmm,
answers to questions, etc.
yeah,
So I'm actually very curious about that. I mean, I don't follow it that closely, but that's a very worthy point of attention, I think.
yeah.
And the
There was a,
multimodal piece is
yes,
also amazing.
yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but just
Oh, of
to
course.
add one more point. Like there was an article in the Wall Street Journal, I think a week or two ago, maybe, about students are actually taking schools to court because they get accused of using AI, and the students are having to defend their reputation and their academic status, basically. So there's that going
Wow.
on. And then the second thing that's going on, which was also very fascinating, was that some student in some university basically complained, saying that if the professors are using ChatGPT and we're not being allowed to use it, they're kind of like cutting corners. I want my money back. you know,
It's unfair,
so
yeah.
you know, I
No, for
think
real.
there's a lot happening in this space right now. So people may or may not have heard about it, but it's, I think, really interesting to see what's happening. You know,
No,
so.
that's actually exciting. Yeah, I mean, I also hear I forget what's the case, but I mean there are all of these copyright infringement cases that are popping up as well. Like
Mhm.
Meta's Llama used some like not really publicly available, but kind of out there, like text for songs or something like that, from
Yeah,
like 500,000 sources. So now somebody decided to sue them, but it's publicly available, so they're not going to probably be get any to get anything out of there. Yeah, it's now very interesting time of development in many of these domains, right? I think as
exactly.
well.
Exactly. Well, listen, Ilya, we're almost at the top of the hour. I don't even know if you realize that we're almost been talking for the last
Not at
hour.
all. Not at all.
So,
I'm ready to continue chatting. Yeah.
me as well. But in fairness to you, it's already pretty late for you in Prague. So I do want to be respectful of your time, and I do want to thank you for taking part of your weekend and spending it with me, talking about all these things here today. So thank you so much for joining the show. How can people reach out to you if they wanted to reach out to you? What would be the best way to connect with you?
Of course, and thank you so much for taking the time as well today. I was just getting into the mood of the deeper conversation, right? Just getting into the flow. No, but it's actually been really great chatting with you today. I really enjoyed it. And in terms of getting in touch with me, either you go to fifthrow.com. Um, there is a contact us button or something like that. Click on
Mhm.
that. That's going to be my calendar link, and feel free to just set up any time. I'm happy to talk whenever there is an availability. And on the other side, just my last name, Filonau at fifthrow.com. Also always open, or LinkedIn, Ilya Filonau. Feel free to reach out at any point in time.
Fantastic. Well, Lydia, thank you so much for your time as well. And thanks everybody for listening. We're going to be coming back in June. And we're going to have, both the podcasts have already been, posted on LinkedIn for June. One of them is with Bill Salakar. We're going to have an interesting conversation. He, just so everyone knows, he wants to talk about prostate cancer. He's a survivor of prostate cancer, and is obviously in the U.S. We had former President Biden come out this past Sunday, and I was sitting there thinking, like, I'm going to be posting my Bill's announcement this week as well. So he's very passionate about sharing his experiences. So that's a conversation we're going to have. And the second conversation is with Nicola Quayle. She attended a United Nations conference in New York about AI and the impact that AI is having on a global basis. And that's going to be a fascinating discussion about how different countries are approaching the partnership, between public and private sector when it comes to AI. So that's going to be a fascinating conversation as well. So that's all planned for the month of June. But again, Ilya, thank you so much. Have a good, long weekend for the folks in the US, and I will see you guys soon.
Have a great weekend. Thank you so much for the time as well.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you. Bye bye. Bye. Bye.